Hello, the crazy world, and welcome again to Live Free and Rant. As you can see, the world's a little bit toasty these days, a little on fire. Everyone's freaking out. But hey, I have my trusty co host, Chris Maidment, by my side to help make sense of this whole nonsense. How's it going, Chris?
I'm still COVID free, Joel. I'm still COVID free, but the world is certainly a crazy place nowadays. You know, when even Rand Paul, the man with the worst luck on the entire planet, apparently comes down with the COVID.
Mm,
Nothing. Who knows?
yeah, who knows? I mean, as you could see, my buddy Bob back there still has his corona mask on, and I'm ready to protect myself and the household just in case. But on that subject of Rand, yeah, so everyone's good old buddy, Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul, if for those who want to esteem his presence, uh, apparently has contracted the coronavirus. And the funniest part about that, which it's not funny, it sucks. He is asymptomatic, so that means he is not actually experiencing negative symptoms of the virus. It means he's not. It's for all practical purposes to him, it's not affecting him in the slightest, really, other than he's a carrier, and God bless his soul, he's been walking all over the Capitol, talking to all kinds of people, and that's the quickest, best way of draining the swamp, maybe, huh?
Yeah, he was at the gym the morning. He got his test results back that morning. He was at the Capitol gym. He's getting all kinds of flack for that. He's caused four other senators now to go into self-isolation. Mitt Romney's in self-isolation. Mike Lee is in self-isolation. Rick Scott is now in self-isolation. So far as I've heard, none of them have tested positive yet, but Rand Paul has the potential to have infected a number of U.S. senators and probably some staffers too.
Yeah, now that's the big disclaimer is now, of course, I'm not actually hoping people get sick and die, possibly. But if that does happen, and if it happens to, you know, it's like on the, I don't want friends and neighbors, I don't want whatever. And then you think about like the people, all the nasty things people always, that happen in our lives because of those nasty men in power and women. There's some of them too. And you think of like, well, I'm slightly sad that they might all be infected, just slightly though. And speaking on the slightly sad infection list, which could be a recurring segment over the next few months, Greta Thunberg apparently believes she has the virus. Now, I I previously knew. I mean, I already knew she had the virus, but I thought it was the virus of communism, not the virus of not the coronavirus, not COVID. But apparently, she might have both, which I guess it's unfortunate. But I wish her speedy recovery of the first one before the second. Yeah, it's been a little bit of a crazy, last few months. Not as crazy as depicted, I don't think. But one thing's for sure, this has been an unprecedented, crazy time for reactions to this sort of thing. And we have seen all kinds of, people do desperate things to try to find a cure. Like drinking Lysol. Not literally Lysol, but something else.
Yes. So, as a public service announcement, do not drink household cleaners in an attempt to kill the coronavirus, especially if you have it. There's this couple in Arizona. This is news that broke either yesterday or today. They heard apparently the president at one of his press conferences talk about how hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine are going to be great treatments for the coronavirus. There's some anecdotal evidence that shows that that is true. But the fishbowl cleaner that you have in the back of your closet, just because it has chloroquine or quinine, which is the base ingredient for chloroquine, just because it has that doesn't mean you should go pour it into a Coca-Cola and drink it like a cocktail, because you will die. And that's what happened to to the husband in Arizona. His wife is still in critical condition at the hospital because she drank fish tank cleaner.
Now, did that
And
cure her virus? Is she still positive?
she didn't have the virus.
Oh.
She didn't have it.
Oh.
They had never even tested positive. They were just trying to, I guess, fend it off or, prevent themselves from getting it. So, of course, the mainstream media is making this out to be, Trump is this evil, evil man because now people are drinking fish tank cleaner. Well, anybody with half a brain knows not to drink fish tank cleaner. Okay.
Yeah, and that's especially funny where I heard recently the same thing happened to a number of folks in Nigerians in Nigeria. Now, that's even stranger because you could think, okay, the U.S. president has a lot more of a kind of impact on the opinion of U.S. people. And you think, okay, maybe a lot of people see him as like the people's hero and just say, oh, I'm just going to a lot of not too smart people just hear him watch him religiously on the TV. He says something and then they just act on it without thinking twice or thinking through what he says. But Nigeria? What random people in Nigeria are watching an address by the U.S. president, mentions some kind of chemicals and stuff, and then just starts drinking probably the same thing, fish tank cleaner, and then just die from it? Like, the levels of not that bright that you have to go through that. I mean, what would you care if the Japanese prime minister started talking about something, what is he saying? Oh, I don't know. He says this could be good for my health. I'm just going to go drink some chemicals and then expire because some foreign leader somewhere all the way over there said something about it. It's crazy.
Well, there's a couple points on that. Is the United States president especially this president, Donald Trump knows how to work the media. But United States presidents have always had an outsized influence on the entire world. I mean, especially countries like Nigeria. I don't know what kind of government system they have over there, but I imagine, there's a reason people from all over the world want to come to America, and it's because of our system of government and the republic that we have and how powerful this country is. And the president had, they say the United States president is the most powerful politician in the world, which is true in a lot of ways. So it kind of makes sense that he's a leader for not just Americans, but for, people in especially third world countries that don't have a leader to look up to. Second point on that isn't Nigeria in Africa where all of these people are taking the anti-malarial drug, hydroxychloroquine, that's been around for a long time. It's an antiviral, which they've been using to treat malaria for, I don't know, a long time, according to people. So why are people in that region looking to fish tank cleaner? I mean, isn't hydroxychloroquine and the anti-malarials, aren't they just, readily available?
Well, I'm not sure if I could comment on the ready availability of any kind of medicine, but it could be the same thing. It could be they're actually taking medicine, but in insane doses because they think, I got to fight malaria and corona, better just take the whole supply, and then it could be fatal. But it is
That's true.
It is kind of funny how, I do understand the concept of if you're a position of some kind of influence and authority, be careful what you say. But the fact that you, the ability to, say, so I have this one guy who I kind of know who's been commenting on this, thinking that the television networks should be compelled by law to not broadcast anything the president says because it's dangerous and it's killing people. I don't know. That's a little bit of a stretch. What do you think?
Oh, that's definitely a stretch. I mean, first of all, we have the freedom of the press in this country. Well, all right. So we sort of have the First Amendment protections, which are.
Well, we better. Otherwise, I got to stop the stream right now.
Yeah, I mean, the First Amendment covers freedom of press, freedom of the assembly, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and freedom of association. Now, you look at, I think pretty much all 50 states have enacted orders to prohibit gatherings of certain sizes, including here in New Hampshire. The governor, Chris Sununu, issued emergency order number 16 today, which prohibits scheduled gatherings. So I guess scheduled is the operable word there. Scheduled gatherings of over 10. So you can, you and 9 friends can get together, but if a 10th friend shows up, then you're breaking the law.
Yeah, I'm glad this didn't happen in Utah because it'd be a little rough for families, right?
Well, we could talk about Germany has banned gatherings over 2. Now, I have 4 people that live in my house all the time. So I guess we'll put the kids outside in dog crates. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, so I wonder if you know how there's always publications out there or opinion people who in a time of some sort of crisis or problem completely miss the point by thinking, like, for example, in this horrible tragedy, global pandemic where people are trying to make sure they and their loved ones survive, as in just breathe another day. How will people have access to gender reassignment surgeries? I'm sure you've seen the commentary like that. Now, I would like to hopefully preempt one by beating him to the joke and just saying, how can a progressive first world country such as Germany ban group sex like this? This is terrible. I mean, just think, you cannot have a threesome in Germany right now. It's just, you cannot have a, it's just not, of course, I'm sure you could find a way, but I would love to see that article written by someone who is not saying it in jest as I am.
Yeah, I mean, what people do in their bedrooms in Germany doesn't really affect me all that much. In just a second, I'll talk about the updated statistics from New Hampshire and the United States as of yesterday. So let's see. In New Hampshire, as of yesterday, we have 101 positive cases. Now, I've been getting flack I've been posting these stats on my Facebook page every day when they're updated. And I have people now yelling at me for spreading hysteria.
Okay.
If posting factual data is spreading hysteria, then I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
Yeah.
Because, we all have to practice our own personal risk assessment and risk management. That is what, freedom-loving people do, is personal responsibility. But in order to make an accurate risk assessment, like if I should go to the grocery store as an immunocompromised person who might catch coronavirus, I need to know how many cases are out there and how it's progressing and follow the news on that. So I've been sharing the news, and I shared this yesterday on my Facebook page. 101 number of persons with COVID-19 in New Hampshire. 1 death. We had our first death yesterday. It was a 60. Yeah, it was somebody over the age of 60 with underlying health conditions in Hillsborough County. And we're at 11% hospitalizations right now. That's a total number of 11 hospitalizations. That is outdated information. That was yesterday. We'll get another update today. Usually they update that around 5:30. And you can find it on my Facebook page because I'm not going to stop sharing the news.
Yeah, that's another thing. Obviously, context of sharing facts and things like that does matter to a certain extent. And I have yelled at my girlfriend before for constantly checking the market prices of things, such as for crypto assets during bad times, and just like every day I'm like, don't look at it every day, it's just gonna make you sad. And I could see, like, if someone posted that every day, it might be mildly annoying, but spreading fear for just, especially if you're saying something very local, you're like, me and my 1.3 million closest friends, right? Me and my closest in my state, this is how many are affected in these parts, and this is how many people might have died. 1. And I mean, that's good information to keep a kind of a daily tally on. Now, if someone says, update, in Italy, so many more people, so many more new mass graves are being done, some, like, whatever horrible stuff you want to say outside of the country, that might be a little bit panic and fear spreading, or FUD spreading, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. If you keep posting those over and over, like just new death sensationalistic headline after another over and over, yeah, that is. But just on a local kind of like, all right, this, what's the score of the game today? It's like the same thing. What's the score in this game of death Shout out to Bruce Lee in this whole situation. I mean, it kind of helps to know like where we're at, how much we should actually be freaking out. And I have to say, up until extremely recently, Stratford County, where I am currently located, had no cases. And so I was like, well, I can just, obviously I was still being safe, right? But I wasn't that worried. Now there's a few. And it's like, all right, that brings a new twist on it. Then now, okay, I'm kind of in the zone. Not that much, but kind of in the zone. I got to be a little bit more careful.
Right. When you know that your neighbor could have it, or you know that the person behind you in line at the grocery store could have it. Now, I mean, of course, everybody estimates that. I shouldn't say everybody. There's a lot of estimates out there that up to 60 or 80% of the population could wind up contracting this disease. Mm-hmm. So, if you can't let the fear control your life. Somebody once said, the only thing to fear is fear itself. You have to keep living your life. We need to reopen the economy. People need to go to work because there are real life effects of what the government is doing.
Yes, and I would like to suggest a T-shirt. In the next "I'm with stupid," that has the arrow. It just says, "This mofo got the Rona." Just start wearing that around. Just kind of like lighten the mood a little bit. But yeah, you're absolutely right as far as the effects of the economy, because very few people, all in all, especially in the U.S., very few people in terms of the numbers have actually gotten hurt by contracting the virus. But how many people have gotten hurt by the effects put in place to counteract the virus spread?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about we could talk unemployment numbers. They're expecting 2.25 million new unemployment claims countrywide this week alone. In New Hampshire, we saw it skyrocket up to about 35,000 already. That was reported yesterday at the governor's press conference. And I think on an average weekly basis, it's like 2,000 unemployment claims, and now all of a sudden we have 35,000 brand new unemployment claims because of all the businesses that have been, there's a lot that have voluntarily shut down, but we're talking, there's a number of businesses that were forced to shut down, such as restaurants and bars. They've been forced to lay off all their servers, all their bartenders, all their dishwashers. The only thing they're allowed to do is takeout and delivery. So, you talk about scaling a restaurant back to 10 or 20% of its normal operating capacity, and that's going to have some downstream effects on the people that depend on that money on a week-to-week or day-to-day basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's the silver lining. I've written about the silver linings about this. But, I mean, the silver lining is a lot more people are moving to remote work kind of things and, shifting into other sectors that might be a little bit less fragile for this kind of thing. There's great silver linings, but despite the silver linings, there's just a whole lot less economic activity going around. This isn't a zero-sum game. I'm sorry, socialists. This is not how it works. There isn't just a big pie of money available, and whoever gets at it, it's like, no. The pie gets bigger or smaller depending on it, and our pie is getting a whole lot smaller right now.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't hit me yet personally. Being in construction, I'm not affected by the coronavirus, but in a couple months, or let's say 2 to 12 months, when people don't have the amount of cash that the stock market's lost almost 40% of its value in the last month or so. When people are looking at their retirement funds and seeing that they've lost 40% of their retirement, well, all the savings and investments that they had that they would use to improve their homes or buy a new home or renovate their kitchen or whatever, well, that money's not there anymore. So it will affect me. It hasn't yet. I'll be one of the laggards of this economic downturn, because let's be real. We're in a recession. We are in a recession. We just don't. We don't have the facts to prove it yet. But I mean, there's estimates that the second quarter GDP could shrink by up to 30% annualized. So that has a lot of real life impacts on a lot of people. And it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot of people. So we're going to have to find ways to pull through that.
Yeah.
And
Um, and here's where we get to like the philosophical question. That's one of those tough ones that there is no right answer to. But our mutual friend Greg Moore of Americans for Prosperity, New Hampshire, I believe he made some post on it talking about the calculations of, you know, obviously anyone dies, that sucks. Now, let me just, rather than try to paraphrase what he said, let me just take my take on that whole thing. Anyone, first off, we're all going to die. That's so death in itself is not necessarily like it's unavoidable. So we all go that way. What we don't want is premature deaths, where the time we have spent on this earth living happy, wonderful, fulfilling lives, making greater generations, all that kind of stuff, that's cut short. That's the tragedy. Now, what about if no one dies or fewer people die, but a lot of lives are impacted dramatically for the worse because of these harsh economic conditions? That is stealing life away from people, even if their whole life isn't gone or on an individual basis. But like, how much, like, what percentage of a person's life combined with, across a whole bunch of people is worth one whole life? And it's like one of those weird, like, you cannot make statistics out of people. People aren't statistics. You can't just say this is this much in economic output. That's what a human life is worth. You can't really do that. You can't. But it is something you have to be thinking about, is how many lives are being saved by each draconian measure, and how much actual damage does it cause, and is it really worth it? And more importantly, there's also the further damages, which are loss of freedom, that's a huge one that it's hard to quantify. But for some people, especially in the live free or die state, it's kind of a binary proposition, right? Be free or die. And it's like, well, we need this to save your life. It's like, great, I don't want it.
Yeah, I mean, if so here looking at it, there's always trade-offs, right? The government is doing these things. They're saying, well, if we enact this, then we can, and of course, nobody's talking about ending the pandemic completely. Everybody's talking about flatten the curve, flatten the curve, flatten the curve. They're not talking about preventing people from getting it entirely. They're talking about preventing people from getting it now. Mm-hmm. So they're saying you're still going to get it. It's just we have to do this because the healthcare system would be overrun. There aren't enough hospital beds. There are not enough ventilators. There isn't enough equipment to take care of you. And we would end up with a situation similar to what's happening in Italy, where they don't have enough beds for people, and they're not treating certain classes of the population. And now you have that moral question about, well, who gets treated? Do you treat the 80-year-old man with cancer, or do you treat the 40-year-old mom of 3? You treat and who deciding who gets the hospital beds, who gets the ventilators, who gets the care. So they're trying to prevent that in America. They're not trying to prevent you from getting it, because you're gonna get it. More likely than not, if their projections are correct, 60 to 80% of the population could end up getting this thing, and up to 20% are going to need hospitalization. So it's just about slowing that spread down. Not about stopping it, it's slowing it down. So that's what we're looking at. It's kind of crazy to think about, like, oh, just stay home for 2 weeks, and then when you get out, then you can get the virus, and hopefully there's a bed for you in the hospital.
Yeah, and thinking about on just pure virus standpoint, the whole Rand Paul thing, I think, might wake some people up in a crazy way, because he's asymptomatic. He does not have symptoms. And the only reason he has this is because his cheery neighbor tackled him a couple of years ago, smashed his lungs. He had to have part of his lung removed. And because he's traveling all over the place as a senator, he thought, well, you know what? With all this virus type thing going around, and me being not of the soundest respiratory health due to, someone almost killing me over who knows what, I might as well get tested. And because he was able to get tested, and they're like, oh, guess what? I have it, but I can't even feel it. How many people who don't have access to tests, have no symptoms, already have it? What if, and this is like, I don't have my Alex Jones conspiracy hat on right now, but like, if I could, what if we all have it? What if we've all had it for what if what if this has been around for like a half a year in the US and a lot of people have already had it for a while? Now, I'm not saying I believe a lot of that, but it's just going to be one of those things that I don't know if we can ever fully know is how many people will end up getting this and how many people had it at what point and how many people like don't have symptoms at all. Then that's another point before we go on to greater things on this whole thing, like how the free market could have handled this a lot better, which I'm sure you're just itching to go jump on. But this is a very strange condition. It's not like, oh, everyone gets this disease. Some people have very bad effects from this, right? Some people who are old and infirm and have respiratory issues and things like that, require hospitalization, get in really bad condition. Some people can pass away. It's pretty crazy. Then a lot of healthy people just kind of get like a weird mild fever, kind of a persistent cold. It's just kind of And then a lot of people just don't get any symptoms whatsoever. And it's a kind of interesting thing to think about from a perspective of the human race and survival of the fittest, of, something like this just washes through, and there's a lot of, because of modern healthcare, there's a lot of people that have been allowed to survive who in previous, centuries would not have survived. And
yeah, and as an asthmatic with allergies, I'm definitely one of those people. If it weren't for modern medicine, I would have died as a 3-year-old if as the story goes, because that's when we discovered I had severe chronic asthma. So I'm one of the people that's saved by modern medicine in that survival of the fittest thing you talk about.
yeah, we're glad it's over, huh? For a lot of the world.
I mean, for most of the world, it is. Especially here in America, we have the most advanced healthcare system on the planet. So we can treat even things like cancer and autoimmune disorders. But getting back to what you were talking about and how the free market could have done this better, we can talk about in just a second here the regulations that are literally costing lives, and now we are waiving those regulations in order to save lives. So we'll talk about that in just a second.
Yeah, so about how could regulations regulations actually cost lives? And I know this pretty well on a conceptual level. I don't know it very well on a case-by-case basis. So why don't you lay on me a few of those things that kind of stick out in your mind?
Well, so number one that sticks out in my mind is a program that's called Certificate of Need. And so a Certificate of Need it's a cronyist board that regulates hospitals and healthcare. And so if you wanted to open a hospital, right, if let's say you lived up in Cowas County in the middle of nowhere, and it takes you 5 minutes to get to the closest hospital, and you just wanted to open a small hospital.
Yeah.
You'd have to go before what was called a Certificate of Need board. And you'd have to prove that there was a definitive need for that hospital in that area. And basically what happened was this board got taken over by people in the industry that wanted to protect their hospitals. So they would say, no, you couldn't open pretty much a hospital in the entire state of New Hampshire. We were rid of the Certificate of Need board. That was in 2016. That law was repealed, but there's still a ton of regulations. For example, some of the things that stick out in my mind is what's going on at the federal level right now. The FDA is waiving all these requirements so that people like Ford and Tesla can start producing N95 masks. Well, why can't anybody produce an N95 mask? Why do you have to be licensed by the FDA and inspected by the FDA in order to produce this N95 mask? It seems pretty simple. In ventilator parts, we have automakers making ventilator parts now because we don't have enough. So the FDA is waiving a bunch of those regulations in order so that these companies can fill the free market demand for the product.
Yeah, that's like a lot of people, think hospital or some sort of a public good. That all this healthcare stuff is like everything else is just some random thing that people can build businesses to supply or whatever. But then it's like that's one of those things because it's so essential. People are like, well, we can't just let this up to the free market. We have to do something else. Or they kind of think about what are we as a society going to do about healthcare? How are we as a society? But no one thinks about that for, say, toilet paper, which apparently people seem to value more than healthcare in these kinds of situations. I don't know why. But food, I mean, sure, there's some like farm bill nonsense and the FDA and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, there's a lot of food stuff that remains pretty unregulated. There's just, our iPhones and stuff. I mean, I don't have one, but I'm just saying there's a lot of stuff that people rely on a day-to-day basis that are not really that regulated at all. And more importantly, even if they are, people don't view that as something that we have to figure out collectively. And like, no one's going to say like, what is the government going to do about a toilet paper shortage? No one has said that as far as I know. And if they have, can you bring them here so I can smack them upside the head real quick? Because, I mean, it's sort of the same thing on a much crazier level. Now, what if, and here's something that is uniquely American, and I don't know exactly what regulations are part of this, but doctors in the U.S. are medical doctors. You go to, say, pre-med for your 4-year degree, and then afterwards you have to get essentially like a PhD, right? Yeah, doctor of medicine. And that's a lot. That doesn't happen in other countries. Most people graduate from university or whatever as a doctor. Most people just, they're in their early 20s or whatever. Like, and that's one of the reasons why there's a lot of medical tourism that goes down to Mexico, is that it's just so much easier to become a doctor. And that doesn't mean that, I'm sure that in some cases there might be some different standards, but for the most part, what are you learning all throughout high school and a 4-year undergraduate degree that has anything to do with your job of being a doctor? And I mean, it's sort of like, that's the thing about trade school. For some reason, like, everyone needs to live in a house, but no one gives a crap about how you get there. No one's like, we need to, we need affordable trade school. We need trade school should be free as a human right. We don't have any people like that going off. It's super essential, right? The trades are super essential, but yet, just kind of figure out how to do it. And
well, the thing on that too is there's like 7 million skilled labor job openings in the country. I mean, that number's probably going to change as the economy turns down, but a vast majority of the people in the trades are people close to retirement. Young people, millennials, Gen Z, whatever you want to call them, aren't in the trades because for 2 decades, we've just been thumping the Bible of everybody must go to college. Everybody must go to college. And then everybody goes to college and they get a degree in underwater basket weaving that doesn't apply to any real life skill. And then they graduate with, a bachelor's in science for underwater basket weaving that doesn't give you any real life skills because nobody wants to watch a YouTube video of you underwater basket weaving. So, a lot of people go to college, they get these degrees that are basically not worth the paper they're printed on, even though they spent $200,000 on them and they're deep in debt. It's basically like they graduate college with a mortgage that, that prevents you from buying a house. So, but nobody's talking about, well, there are people, but the focus is always on college debt forgiveness and free college for all. No, we should stop sending people to college. Go get a job.
Yeah.
I didn't go. I went to 1 semester of college straight out of high school. I was taking accounting, and I already had a full-time job. And I said, well, I don't need to go to college. I have a full-time job. It turns into a career. I ended up working there for 10 years as a manager. I made good money, and then I left. But I didn't need college to do what I do, so I didn't go to college. And there's a lot of people that don't need to go to college. If you're not going to be a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or, pick a skill, if you're not going to college to learn a skill, then you're wasting your time.
Yeah. And so that's an interesting subject that's, I'm sure an hours long subject, because first off, there's a lot of people, the younger generation, that are in this kind of bad limbo. They kind of, follow the plan that's set forth. They go to college. They get some kind of degree. You're supposed to follow your passion, whatever. And they're like, I don't know, let's try this. You have $100,000 in debt, and then you have no job prospects, and you just end up, in this like weird, the millennial malaise limbo that is like so common. And a lot of that is because, they didn't necessarily want to go to college. That was just what was laid out in front of them. Oh, everyone should. And, your grandfather, he never did. I was the first one to go to college in the family, and you're going to do it too, and all this kind of stuff. And then because of this whole like everyone's supposed to be whatever you can be. Your grandpa worked with his hands, but you'll never work with your hands. And then because of that, now they would rather work some minimum wage job at some some hipster coffee shop and be like an artist on the side or whatever else kind of thing, and like barely scrape by into their late 30s. They'd rather do that than get a high paying job in the trades because of the perceived social cost of that. Even if they want a better life, they just like, well, but I don't want to I want to fail and be a plumber. At least if I'm like a barista while I'm an artist, I'm still kind of an artist or whatever. At least I'm not a failure, kind of. And then if I was a plumber, I'd be a failure despite feeding my family. It's a crazy thing.
And then what happens is you become a homeowner and you have a clogged toilet and you call a plumber and you look at the bill and you go, why is this so expensive? Well, let me tell you what, we have a shortage of plumbers.
Yeah.
Okay, they're highly regulated. And it takes 4 years to become a master plumber at minimum, and because they're so in demand, they charge over $100 an hour, and that's
like
up in
lawyer
New
fees.
Yes, that's in New Hampshire, in rural New Hampshire. We're not talking Boston rates. $100 an hour in New Hampshire for a residential plumber. So when your boiler breaks down and somebody has to come at 2:00 in the morning, it's even more than that because it's the emergency rate. Now you're paying like $200 an hour, and yet people look down on them and they're like, "Well, I don't want to be a plumber." Well, they're making bank over there.
Yeah.
The plumber I know a plumber because I do construction. The plumber I worked with when I first got into this, Dave Fields, he bought all three of his daughters a house in cash when they got married. All three of them. He bought 3 houses in cash because he makes a ton of money as a plumber and he was able to put some away and take care of his kids.
Are you sure?
So don't give me that crap.
Are you sure he's not a senator? It sounds like robbery,
Yeah, but I mean, the demand, there's little supply and there's high demand. So that's, what causes prices to go up. If we had more plumbers, the prices would have to come down. It's just the way it is. So,
Yeah, I mean, think about this for schools, right? So first off, trade school, the concept, it's sometimes necessary, sometimes not. I'm sure there's a lot of people who never went to trade school who got great careers in the trades. Now, as far as a lot of things people go to university for, that's more of a trade type thing too. Like I would even say medicine is a trade. I wouldn't say that's like you need to go to all this like, you need to be a philosopher and university educated. Like, no, you just learn how to do medicine, learn how to do that stuff. It's a skill. You're out of high school, you're out of like, you can probably read and write at that point, and then as soon as you're out of there, you just like you go to medical trade school for a couple of years, get out, or however long it takes, get out and go to work in medicine. Now,
yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's that simple because there is a lot of book learning that needs to be done with medicine. Like the biology of the human body is so intricate.
Oh yeah.
Of course, a vast majority of becoming a doctor comes down to be, practice. You do your residency and you do your internship and you actually practice medicine to become a doctor, which makes perfect sense in every industry because that's how you learn how to do anything is by practicing it.
Yeah. And I do think that the old, like the university model of like getting some sort of liberal arts degree or whatever, I do think there's a lot of value in that. But I don't think it's like a hard economic value in the short term where, first off, that kind of thing is something that you can now do kind of online with just like a little bit of direction. People say, hey, read these books. Hey, let's chat about this. It's like that kind of stuff can be done largely for free. And the price of such a thing should be relatively low because not like let's funnel everyone through this and just say, oh, we won't even hire you if you cannot just prove that you went through this meat grinder. It's like it should just be something that people pursue on their own. Now, I do notice it like a lot of people have success who have some sort of like, a degree in philosophy or something like that, who are coders, for example. They have like an actual marketable skill, or they're financial analysts, or like whatever else. A degree. So like I have found that I've heard this from a few different sources that such kind of like non-specific degrees are actually in demand for people like that, because they kind of have a greater grasp on how to think and stuff like that, provided they actually have the skill to do the job too, right? You actually have to know how to code. You actually have to be able to do whatever you're doing, and that little philosophy on the stuff is like the cherry on top. But that's kind of the proper role for universities, but it's not like a 80 grand in debt kind of a role. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you broke up there a little bit at the end, but I think you're hitting
Yeah.
the nail on the head. The role of universities, in my view, in school in general, or learning in general, is for you to learn how to learn. Once you learn how to learn, you can learn anything, anywhere, anytime, for next to nothing. Especially in today's day, and we talked about this in the last podcast at length, so I won't get down in the weeds again. But the vast amount of resources online for anybody to learn anything. If you learn how to learn, then you can learn anything, and you can learn it anywhere. But in just a second, we can talk about how New Hampshire schools are doing and how they've transitioned over to remote learning, and they got a big shout out. So yesterday at the White House press conference, Vice President Pence gave a huge shout out to New Hampshire, saying that we lead the way on the distance learning approach that schools have been forced to adopt here in New Hampshire. Commissioner Edelblut, I think personally, has done a fantastic job. As you know, during the 2016 primary, he just barely lost to Governor Sununu, who then appointed him Commissioner of Education. And I think with Governor Sununu and Frank Edelblut in charge of the education system in New Hampshire, we're moving in a very positive direction. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And since I don't have kids, this isn't always like the number one thing on my radar at this point. But I do remember, obviously, I was homeschooled my entire life. And most of college, like all but like a year, I think, was all done distance as well. So distance learning is kind of redundant for me. And now it's like when you have people doing like, when they see how they can just telecommute into this stuff, I'm like, oh, this is the cat's out of the bag now. Like, it's not just for homeschooling. It's just, even if for people that don't trust their parents to, or families who the parents just don't want to figure out how to take ownership over their kids' learning, whether that means actually teaching them or just saying, hey, let's do this. Well, they just say, I don't know, I want to deal with it. Someone else teach my kids, which is kind of a dangerous philosophy. I think that you're just like, I don't care where my kids learn everything they'll ever know. But just the fact you can do it distance, like, think of all the spending increases in local towns and property taxes and all that, just because someone wants a bigger school. Oh no, we need a bigger school. The high school is so outdated. We need to build a big physical building. And just think of all the wasteful spending that just could go to, pay this guy to just go on and just, there you go, just go on the computer and just run a little virtual classroom, I mean, think about like teachers are underpaid and all this stuff. Okay, whatever you want to say about that. What if the teacher doesn't even have to, get up and like go and deal with all this paperwork and show up at a building? What if they can just focus on teaching? What if as soon as that's done, they start teaching a class in China? Like 5 minutes later, they just literally log on. Hi kids, I'm teaching English now. Okay. This person's already great at teaching if they could do it. Like, what if there's a free market for education that leveraged distance learning? And I think that as I said, the cat's out of the bag with this. Thanks to New Hampshire now having that for like emergency services education during this trying times. What about when times aren't so trying? What if we could just can't we just do this now?
Yeah, so I think we're going to see a lot of people hopefully move in that direction. We have all the 170,000 students in New Hampshire are now learning at home. They're learning at a distance. They're getting taught by their parents, who are being forced to stay home because they don't have jobs. So I'm sure there's a lot of parents that are struggling with this, so I don't want to minimize that because, getting just thrust into this and kind of being on your own can be overwhelming. And I learned that firsthand yesterday. I was home. I worked from home yesterday. My wife was there. My 2-year-old was there. He's 2.5. And my 6-month-old baby was there. But we also had my 5-year-old brother-in-law. Not everybody can say they have a 5-year-old brother-in-law. I know. It's my wife's adopted brother. He's 5. So he was doing distance learning. And the teacher emailed a work packet with the lessons of the day. And I watched my wife try to teach him his schoolwork while taking care of a 2.5-year-old and a 6-month-old. And I was blown away because I was like ready to get out of there. I was like, I gotta go. I'm gonna go to the bar or something. And the bars, of course, are closed, so I couldn't do that. And I was like, I guess I'll just stay home and we'll figure this all out together. So I know that, getting thrust into this as a parent, especially if you have young kids or you've never done this before, or you're the sole provider for your family, I know that can't be easy. So I don't want to minimize it for parents, but there are resources out there. The Department of Education website at education.nh.gov, I believe. There's the Children's Scholarship Fund of New Hampshire. Kate Baker does a great job over there. There's the Granite State Home Educators Group. They have a website. You can find also on Facebook. You can find them. So there are, if you're struggling in your home and you've got your kids and you're trying to teach them, you're not in this alone. There's tons of resources. Just, get on Google and look for them, or go to the places I just mentioned. Because after yesterday, I have immense amounts of more respect for home educators in particular. Especially people with, more than one kid learning at home, especially, with infants or toddlers or whatever the case may be. But you're not in this alone. So reach out for help if you need it. And if you can't find it, send me a message and I'll try to connect you to the right people.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I believe in the short term people are going to be like, this is my hell. I could barely put up with my kids for like a few hours a day, much less all day, and try to direct them into something kind of organized. And I think in the short term people are going to be like, this is the worst thing. I hate homeschooling, all this kind of stuff. But then give it a few months until you adjust, and then people are going to be like, yeah, why can't we just always do this? Instead of like, I just send my kid away, they're miserable, they come back, they still have to do homework or whatever, they still ask me how to do these basic things, which I wish that I had just taught them that or helped them learn that on their own right away, rather than have some teacher screw it up, and then now I still have to clean up afterwards. So it's gonna be something that's pretty interesting to see. I think we're gonna see especially when it's like, in emergency situations, you can homeschool. That's kind of where we're at now. It's an emergency, you may homeschool. In case of emergency, breakout, textbook, whatever. But what happens when it's no longer an emergency? Are you now disallowed from doing this? Like, I understand some people might be, you got to put them back in school, whatever. But what about the people that say, nah, I'm good. I think I kind of want to just keep doing this thing. Especially, then what happens when the schools start losing out on funding because, they get funded per pupil, and a lot of ones just aren't in school anymore. And then now the whole, kids, we need this, we need, like, all the kind of histrionics you get from, I would not say from average hardworking teachers that just want to do a best job educating the kids in their state. But as far as like the union crazies who just want more money all the time, doesn't matter what, and all, whoever agenda-driven people are just trying to squeeze the taxpayer for more money, build to education, and have no actual interest in the education of the kids. I think that their arguments are going to start to become a lot weaker, and this could, again, trying to find the silver linings always of tragedies, this could end up weakening the overall grip that government has on basically everything that we do. And maybe I'm a little more optimistic than maybe I should be on this thing, but hey, we'll see who's right.
Well, it's certainly something like we talked about earlier. There's regulations in the way of education that are, blocking what could be best for children. Mm-hmm. And there's regulations that are blocking what could be best for we waived a couple. Like, for example, it's illegal for a restaurant to deliver beer under normal circumstances. But now, because it's an emergency and they can't have people in their dining room, they're allowed to do takeout wine, and they're allowed to deliver takeout cans of beer or bottles of wine as long as it's in the original packaging. I'm working currently on getting the governor to go a little bars to fill up growlers and crowlers. You know what those are, but for those that don't, a growler is a glass or metal reusable beer vessel, and they're pretty fantastic. Like all the, so like let's take Murphy's. I mean, he's got a ton of beers. The Thirsty Moose has a ton of taps. So you have all those kegs that have been tapped, and they're gonna go stale. If this drags on, it's not going to be no good. It's already tapped.
Yeah.
Good. You can't sell it. What, are you just going to dump thousands of dollars worth of beer down the drain? So if the governor allows for at bars, we'll be able to move some of that inventory before it spoils. And that's really what I hope to see.
That would definitely be fantastic. And if this kind of thing not only becomes an emergency measure, but becomes a regular life measure, I definitely want dibs on the first delivery only beer store called Beer Emergency. Because hey, it was good for an emergency, and I guess what, it's always a beer emergency for someone. So that seems like a pretty good part to wrap it up. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Don't forget to, whatever platform you're watching this on, subscribe, throw some likes, etc. We also have links for donation stuff, including the Patreon, and of course audio only in case you're listening to this on audio only, in which case there should be video only links. But just don't forget to get involved with everything. We're going to keep these things going. Try to keep it fun and light in these crazy dark times. So as always, stay safe out there and stay free out there.